Welcome. You're listening to Sons and Kings, the Psalm 2 show where we unlock the church's ancient battle cry of divine filiation and embrace the gentle kingship of Christ through the riches of the Christian tradition. Happy Tuesday. Let's begin. All right, welcome back to Sons and Kings, the Psalm 2 show. Here as always with Pat and Lewis, excited to continue and almost wrap up our discussion here of verse 3. This is our fourth discussion on verse 3. And last time we touched a little bit on one, what if you kind of interpreted the verse in the opposite way, as something that you're kind of saying with the psalmist, rejecting the kind of the bad chains of the evil kings. And so kind of we're gonna, we kind of ultimately concluded with Aquinas, or we're accepting Aquinas's, resolution that, that other interpretation is not really how the psalm was written. So that's fine. So we're gonna kind of go back to, thinking about, the kind of the bonds that the kings and the people are trying to reject from Christ. And so in this sense, we can think about the church's teaching and the authority of the church, the magisterium, and the dogmas that are passed down, sort of our obedience, to the Pope, to the bishops, and to sort of what the church gives us, and recognizing that authority as really a source of true freedom. And this is not just it doesn't come from nowhere. This is the fruit really of the gospel. What our Lord taught us, and sort of like the parables that He would give us about what the kind of the kingdom of heaven is actually like. If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think the best parable for seeing the church's authority as kind of the living presence of Christ in the world as his body, as the source of true freedom, is in the parable of the vine and the branches, where it is only by being attached, bound to the vine, that the branches can receive life, that they are fruitful. And um, this kind of this this freedom is or this binding as a source of freedom, which is again a paradox, comes from the reality of our nature, right? That in rebelling against Christ, and we've been rebelling against Christ, we're rebelling against the design of our own nature that He Himself gave us, right? That was spoken into us at the creation of the world. That the nature we've received from Him, um, we reject it when we reject Christ, and we cannot reject it, right? That's not something you can get rid of. It will always be a part of you. So it's an insane thing to try to cast off your bonds. I like this verse in relation to, this is the second psalm of the book of Psalms, but it's the second to last psalm, kind of undoes this attempt by the kings to cast off these chains. We read in Psalm 149, in verse 9, that it's the duty of the glory of the faithful people of God to bind the kings of the earth with fetters, and to bind the nobles with shackles of iron. Um, so, and that seems like it's a violent imagery, but it's if what are the bonds being talked about here that God imposes on the kings of the earth? Well, it's their nature, and so it's the glory of all His faithful people, all the faithful people of God, is to restore and reunite, really, the kings of the earth, the princes of the earth, and all its peoples with their true nature, right? To kind of restore them to that glory of their nature, which is in the end freedom and reunion with the vine, which gives life to all its branches. So I kind of like that there's kind of this parallel structure within the Psalms. That Psalm 2, okay, we're going to try to throw off these chains. Psalm 149, second to last psalm. Well, they're coming right back on you because you can't
Yeah,
escape them.
coming
And in
right
fact,
back
you
on you.
never really got rid of them. So
Mhm.
I kind of like that ring composition in these psalms.
Yeah, and I like the reframing of the chains and looking at the vine imagery because, and I even think like vine is good. And for folks who don't see vines a lot, one of the similar notions could be like imagine like a leaf on a tree, and a leaf is like I want to be free from the tree to be free to be myself, and so the leaf falls off the tree. Now it's dead. Okay, like, there's no freedom in that. There's no freedom in becoming a pile of leaves dead on the ground, except for the freedom of people jumping in those leaves, which is fun. But the point being, and I love what you're talking about with kind of like the looking at the ending verse of verse 149 or the Psalm 149 and that second part. It's almost like we are given the vocation, the gift of being able to help a leaf get reattached to the tree and come back to life and you reflourish. And I love too in that same part of John 15, where he says, I am the true vine and my father is the vine grower, and that no branch apart from me can bear fruit. I love how he says, like, abide in me, abide, like, again, we're framing like these chains as like, you imagine you're in jail, but really it's an invitation to abiding and an invitation to fruitfulness and vitality. And again, like the image of reattaching the leaf back to the tree where it can get all the nutrients it needs to kind of really be able to flourish and thrive. Um, and so I love like that kind of parallel image that I think can provide that counterbalance. Um, and I love how when you're talking about Aquinas, for example, going back, this is in a previous episode, how Aquinas talked about in one of his commentaries on this verse that the bonds, like these royal connections between the royalty and the people, how that is like a way to look at this, as subjects to the kingship of Christ. We should, when we read this verse and we reflect on that and we reflect on how we have these royal bonds to Christ as king, we should also think like this is the king who is the gardener. This is the king who
Mhm.
is the vine. And through that kingship, all through that royal relationship, through that becoming adopted as children of the royal relationship, we're having like these nutrients flow through us, this life, this vitality. And when we call people to reignite their bonds with this loving vine, if you will, we're really trying to invite them into a new vitality,
Mhm.
into a new wholeness, and to abide in this relationship that, yes, has rights and has obligations, but really is a life giving, flourishing place to abide, um, which I think is, again, an interesting image to look at in relationship to the images of chains and bonds and
Sure.
boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, maybe in verse 2 at some point we brought up the story of the prodigal son, um, and that, ultimately that imagery that our Lord gives us is like this son has rejected relationship,
Mm,
um, and so the solution is like to go back, right? To turn back, hey, I wanna be in the Father's household once again, and I respect that bond of relationship, and it means I gotta work in the field, like, awesome, great, like, because I'm with you. I'm with you here, and that life is way more living, much more worth living. We can apply that to obviously to our human relationships too, like, okay, yeah, we're yoked together, in some way, we're trying to go in the same direction, but there's, like, fulfillment there, and there's satisfaction there, that this life is worth living, and this relationship enables that, and if I pour myself into that relationship, uh, it's so much more meaningful than maybe the isolation that I was, choosing before.
Yeah, I like that imagery of the prodigal son and restoration. And not to spoil anything, but it makes me think of verse 7. This kind of today, the Lord declares, "You are my son. This day I have begotten you." And that phrase, "This day I've begotten you," is bizarre to me. Like, you begot me this day. Like, well, he's already the king speaking in the psalm is already alive. So how could he be begotten this day? But I think with what you were saying about the prodigal son remind me of, yeah, that in a way, when the prodigal son returns, the merciful father begets him all over again. You are my son today.
Mm.
Let me renew that relationship of father and sonship, which maybe alleviates some of the mystery of today I have begotten you in verse 7.
Mhm.
But
Wow, spoiler. Wow,
yeah,
you should have
sorry.
warned everybody.
It's so interesting too because I want to also touch on a Bellarmine quote you said in the last episode we had. At the end of that quote, I'm not going to summarize the whole quote, but these bonds that at first can seem. I also think about the Manasseh story that we talked about in a previous episode. At first, these bonds that seem so hard, painful, that you want to reject them, that, they seem like same thing in the prodigal son story. This relationship between father and son seems so, for the son, he's like, this is burdensome. I just want to flee from this as fast as I possibly can. But then looking at the prodigal son story, when he returns, how sweet is the father's house then? Like, I imagine when he's walking up to the father's house, the lights that he used to see and be like, I hate this house. I hate these lights. Like, I hate this, whatever. Now he's seeing it as like, this is salvation. This is the best thing ever. This is amazing. And Bellarmine says, like, in his commentary on the psalm, that now these bonds are sweeter than honey, more desirable than gold and precious stones. That, like, and we see that with Manasseh. He hates being the king of Israel that has to follow these laws. He wants to do it his own way. I think of Frank Sinatra, I did it my own way. He thinks he's doing that. But then when he repents and he sees his error, now it's sweet. Now he's like, oh my goodness, like I love the law. And now he goes about, having this joyful restoration of Jerusalem, restoring the temple, restoring the altars, he has to restore because he sees it as such a sweet, beautiful thing. And how many times in our own life when we kind of we're able to overcome something, we see a new sweetness in this capacity to overcome, or when we meet somebody who converted to the faith and the zeal that they have and like the love for these, they're like, I want to do as much as I can, as many devotions as I can, like that, that joy and that love for that freedom that they find in that relationship again. And yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And you reminded me of, JP2, his whole thing of the gift of self. And I actually just read for the first time, you know, the last play that he wrote, um, I think it was the last play that he wrote in general, because obviously he becomes Pope. And it's like, he doesn't have time to write plays anymore.
No, unfortunate.
Unfortunately. And he called it like the radiation of fatherhood. And in there, he talks about, um, sort of like using some of the imagery from the garden and Adam's, uh, the original sin he frames up as like a rejection of relationship, and chooses loneliness. He chooses like they choose isolation, and a- and then he presents a solution to that as the gift of self, as what he calls the radiation of fatherhood. Okay, I'm going to now, like, basically pour into my existing relationships, if for the father of a family, okay, my relationship with my wife, my kids, my colleagues at work, my neighbors around me, and that, so like it's interesting so much that it's the basically the um the sort of the problem becomes a solution, so to speak, with a reframing,
Yeah.
with a, looking at this anew. So, well, I'm not mad that you gave a spoiler, but we'll get to this, little by little. Next time we'll start verse 4.
Why this tumult among nations, among peoples this useless murmuring? They arise, the kings of the earth. Princes plot against the Lord and his anointed. Come, let us break their fetters. Come, let us cast off their yoke. He who sits in the heavens laughs. The Lord is laughing them to scorn. Then he will speak in his anger. His rage will strike them with terror. It is I who have set up my king on Zion, my holy mountain. I will announce the decree of the Lord. The Lord said to me, you are my son. It is I who have begotten you this day. Ask, and I shall bequeath to you the nations. Put the ends of the earth in your possession. With a rod of iron you will break them, shatter them like a potter's jar. Now, O kings, understand. Take warning, rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with awe and trembling. Pay him your homage, lest he be angry and you perish, for suddenly his anger will blaze. Blessed are they who put their trust in God.
Hey, this is Jake. Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Sons and Kings, the Psalm 2 show. We're really glad that you joined us today. We hope you got something out of it. And if you did, I'd love to invite you to share it with a friend, or even just like or subscribe to the platform. It really helps us to get the message out to more people, help more people with the show. Thank you again, and we'll see you in the next episode.